Okay, this is my 1989 Kawasaki Vulcan. And this is my carburetor, and it's all in parts, as you can see. It has been took apart, and it is waiting for this part, these two bows right here. What happened on this was I was putting this together, and I had it together, and I was putting it in the bike, and as you notice on this side, this fuel intake right here is pointing in this direction, and this is where the gas comes into the gas, and right here is the vapor lines right here that go up towards the front of the box, the air box, and right here is the fuel intake for the bowls, and on this side is the fuel intake for the other bowl, for the front bowl. All right. So if you'll notice right here, this has been broken off, and it was broken off. I broke it off. Uh, when I took this carburetor out, I didn't notice that the valve intake was pointing this way. Okay. Now on the other side, it's pointing this way. And in the manual, it's pointing this way. So someone has turned this, and what they did was they broke it off, and then it was pointing this direction. And what they done was that they glued this part back on right here. So when I put the motorcycle back, I didn't have any. This is the first time I took one of these motorcycle carburetors apart. So, and I was watching quite a few of the videos on YouTube and looking at the manual. I had the manual for it, and I said, well, I can do this myself. So, but I didn't take into consideration to really pay that much attention to the angle of this intake, gas intake line right here. So it was pointing this way. So I put the carburetor all back together again. I had it all cleaned up, and all these pieces were all in these carburetors. I had it all looking good. I shined it up. I made it look good, and cleaned it up with carburetor cleaner, and then used the fine wire. Uh, what do you call it? It's real fine, like SOS pad, but it wasn't. It was anyway. But it was a cleaner that uh, wool, steel wool, and I cleaned all the parts up and got them looking good. And I put the motorcycle carburetor back together. So after I put it back together and took it out and started putting it in the bike, and I had almost everything on, and this was against the cylinder wall, the rear cylinder wall, and this broke. So now these parts right here are not available. You cannot get these parts, so be very careful and be sure and check these parts and making sure that they are in the right direction when you pull these carburetors off these Vulcans, uh, 750s, because somebody could mess it up, and evidently this is what happened with this one. So, and I didn't notice it, and it was pointing that direction, and it hit against the cylinder head, the cylinder wall when I was putting it back together, and, well, okay, it broke off. So these parts are not available uh, to get from OEM Kawasaki parts, so they're not. You can't replace these. You can't. So what I'm having to do is buy the two bowl connection right here, the connections right here, this whole float bowl, and so I'm gonna have to take off this nut right here for my choke adjuster right here, and also a screw back here in the back, and these arms will also come out of there because those are my butterfly uh, fuel intake on my throttles. So, and then I noticed back here that there's a spring back here that I need to pay close attention to, because here's the spring that is hooked to the back of this part of the motorcycle carburetor. And so I'm trying to pay quite a bit of attention to this because I want to make sure that it runs and I put this thing back together again. And then I have the manual, and then I can also look at the manual. But that's what's happened, and this is the part right here that I'm going to have to purchase. And they're like 170 bucks, and then the shipping. So that's going to cost me 170 bucks, but you know, it's worth it if I get my bike running the way I want to. And it will. It will run the way that I need it to run. And I think later on what I will do is, seeing how the bike runs, I may put me some washers on here depending on how that the bike runs. Uh, this one here doesn't have the little grooves in it to put the little washers on it, but you can still slide the washers on it and it'll still work just as good. Uh, and then also, if I check on the main jet and the slow jet, I may increase the main jet and the slow jet, you know, depending on how, uh, what type of throttle that I have, and if it bogs down, or, but I want to get it running the best I can. And my pilot jets are looking good, so I'm not going to have to really fool around with that stuff all that much, but I'm just be glad to get it going again. And there's really a lot to these little carburetors, but they're really not that hard to take apart and put back together. Uh, there's a lot of information on YouTube about these carburetors and being took apart, and I have some that are on my prescribed list that I get a lot of information off of, and it's really an exciting thing to do. And I heard one guy say, and I liked what he said about it, was that don't be afraid to work on these carbs. Don't be afraid to get that challenge in your life, because these are really good. And it belongs to you, and it's a reflection. Your bike is a reflection of who you are, and you want your bike to run good. And so this is what I'm working on, and because I love my bike, and I'm going to take care of it, and it's going to run the way that I need it to run. And so when I start putting this back together and get the parts that I need for this to start assembling my carburetors, I will assemble them and see what it looks like when it's back together, and then maybe show a few parts being put back together. I don't know how that's going to work yet with a Android phone, but anyway, I'll see what I can do, and I will show at least when it's back together, and then when I get it in the bike. So I'm just kind of going. I'm new with YouTube too, so that's just about it. And I'm gonna see what happens with this. All right, see you later.